The Climb, Chapter 2 by John Escott. Costas walked along the beach and looked up at the hill at the end. The rocks were steep. One was shaped like a head of a bird, a large eagle with a sharp-looking beak. There were signs at the bottom of the cliff. Dangerous! Keep away! No climbing! This rock was called Eagle's Rock. It was steep and dangerous to climb. Costas stood and looked up at it for a long time. He often thought about climbing the rock. He even dreamed about it. He thought about climbing it. But how? Which way? It was all what he wanted to do. He dreamt of climbing Eagle's Rock almost every day now. At the top of the hill was a large white house with a long garden down to the cliff edge. It was a very handsome house which belonged to a man called Mr. Vitalis. He sometimes had guests, but he lived in the house alone for most of the time. He owned a computer company on the island. Almost everybody on the island knew him, and everybody knew about Mr. Vitalis' house. It was the biggest house on the island. It had a high electric fence around three sides of the garden. The fence had a special burglar alarm. When somebody climbed over the fence, the alarm rang in the police station. Mr. Vitalis wanted everybody to know that, too. I don't want burglars, he said, so I tell everybody about my burglar alarm. There was no fence on the cliff side of the garden. There was no need for one. A person had to climb Eagle's Rock to get into the house on that side. And nobody's going to try that, Mr. Vitalis always said. The house was called Eagle House, named after the cliff below it. It was a good name for a fine house. But Costas wasn't looking at Mr. Vitalis' house. He was looking at Eagle's Rock, thinking about the climb. 25 meters high. Follow the crack of the bird-shaped overhang. Move on slowly until it gets easier, then up the shelf above. Then a difficult climb for the next few meters, he said to himself. He was excited, just thinking about it. Eleni dried herself with a towel. That is the overhang. Eleni dried herself with a towel and walked across the beach to Costas. She knew immediately what he was thinking about. She could see it in the look on his face. It worried her. Stop looking at it, Costas, she said. Stop thinking about it. You can't climb Eagle's Rock. It's too dangerous. 2 men and a woman have already died. That was true. Costas knew. There were a lot of accidents and 3 deaths already, while people tried to climb the rock. But don't you understand, Costas said. I don't want to be the first person to climb it to the top. Then I'll be famous. Or dead, Eleni said. Costas just laughed. Why don't you go up with other climbers, Costas? Eleni said. It's much more dangerous to climb alone all the time. You frighten me. You don't understand, Costas said. It's more exciting. Just me against the cliff. A real test of my climbing skills, of my nerve. His eyes shone as he spoke. She took his arm and tried to pull him away from the cliff. She was angry at him now. Come home, she said. I want to shower and have some breakfast before I go to the shop. She pulled him away. All right, Costas said at last. And don't tell father that you want to climb Eagle's Rock, Eleni told him. He'll go crazy. Mr. Kasaku didn't like his son climbing rocks on cliff. He thought it was stupid. But Costas loved to climb. It excited him. It tested his nerve. I feel free, he said. Just me and the birds. Sometimes I even feel like a bird up there. He tried to tell his father how he felt, but Mr. Kasaku didn't listen. He didn't understand the excitement of using climber's skills. Eleni and her brother walked across the sand to the cliffs on the other side. They found the steps up to the cliff road above. The sun was warm on their backs. It's going to be a hot day, Eleni said. The holiday villas were on the cliff road. Their father was outside that villa that he owned. He was a small man with a thick mustache and a happy smile. Costas, Eleni, Mr. Kasaku called them. Come and meet Mr. Holland. A fair-haired man stood next to Mr. Kasaku. He didn't seem interested in meeting Costas or Eleni, but he waited. He watched them closely as they walked across to the garden of the villa. Costas and Eleni shook hands with him. Costas looked hard at the man's face until the man looked away. Mr. Holland seems nervous, Eleni thought. Mr. Holland has come from England, Mr. Kasaku said. He is staying at the villa for 2 weeks. He is a writer. A writer, Eleni said. That's exciting. Do you write books? Sometimes, said the man. He didn't seem to want to talk about it. Have you ever been to the island before? Costas asked him. The man shook his head. No, never, he said. I thought I knew your face, Costas said. Do you have any friends on the island, Mr. Holland? Mr. Kasaku asked. Holland shook his head again. No, I know nobody on the island, he said. There are a lot of good walks, Mr. Kasaku told him. Yes, Holland said. Perhaps I'll do some walking. Then he turned and went inside the villa. Mr. Kasaku walked back along the cliff road with Costas and Eleni. Their home was up the hill in the town. Mr. Holland didn't want to talk, Costas said. He wanted to get inside the villa. Perhaps he's shy, Mr. Kasaku said. He was pleased that the man was staying in the villa for 2 weeks. It wasn't a very good summer for tourists. Perhaps he just likes being alone. They walked up the hill to a small town. A few shops were open. A waiter was putting chairs and tables outside a small cafe. A woman was washing the step outside her house. Costas was silent as he walked. Where have I seen Mr. Holland before? He thought. I'm sure I've seen him. Mr. Kasaku went to help his wife in the garden. She was picking tomatoes for lunch. What's the matter? Eleni asked Costas when they were inside the house. You look worried. Is something wrong? I'm sure I've seen Mr. Holland before, Costas said. But where? Eleni said. He says he's never been to the island. I know he said that, Costas said. But I don't believe him. The end. I hope you like it.